This is America in the Morning from Westwood One. Special report, America strikes Iran. I'm John Trout. It's Monday, June 23rd, 2025. Here's what's coming up on America in the Morning.
The U.S. describes how Operation Midnight Hammer played out. I'm Clayton Neville.
We're joined by Gregg Roman, Executive Director of the Middle East Forum.
On Wall Street, markets open with investors reacting to the U.S. hitting Iranian nuclear targets over the weekend and oil prices shooting higher. I'm Jessica Ettinger.
In Wayne, Michigan, tragedy averted when a man in tactical gear opened fire inside a church. Wayne County Police Chief Ryan Strong says he was stopped by members of the church. I'm Jeff McKay.
All ahead on America in the Morning. The United States is providing details on how the weekend airstrikes on Iran unfolded. Correspondent Clayton Neville reports.
Operation Midnight Hammers being called by the chairman of the Joint Chief of Staff the largest B-2 operational strike in U.S. history. United States officials say the series of strikes caused extremely severe damage and destruction to the targets.
It was an incredible and overwhelming success.
U.S. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth.
Thanks to President Trump's bold and visionary leadership and his commitment to peace through strength, Iran's nuclear ambitions have been obliterated.
The mission included 7 B-2 Spirit bombers that flew east from Whiteman Air Force Base in Missouri to Iran directly.
As part of the plan to maintain tactical surprise, part of the package proceeded to the west and into the Pacific as a decoy, a deception effort known only to an extremely small number of planners.
Joint Chief of Staff Chairman Dan Raisin Kane expanded on how the operation played out.
At approximately 6:40 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 2:10 a.m. Iran time, the lead B-2 dropped 2 GBU-57 massive ordnance penetrator weapons on the first of several aim points at Fordo.
The Pentagon says they used 75 precision-guided weapons and over 24 Tomahawks. Initial battle damage assessments indicate all 3 targeted nuclear sites that were struck sustained extremely severe damage. Fordo, the primary target, the Natanz site and Isfahan site also hit.
The strike package was supported by U.S. Strategic Command, U.S. Transportation Command, U.S. Cyber Command, U.S. Space Command, U.S. Space Force, and U.S. European Command.
The U.S. says the nuclear sites that were targeted are destroyed. The goal is to cripple Iran's nuclear capabilities. The International Atomic Energy Agency said over the weekend that there has been no increase in off-site radiation levels. The head of the nuclear watchdog announced an emergency meeting of the Board of Governors. I'm Clayton Neville.
The top stories of the day are sponsored by Sleep Number. Smarter sleep is life-changing. Save over $600 on a Sleep Number King P5 smart bed, the lowest price of the season, only at a Sleep Number store. America in the Morning, U.S. strikes Iran. Special report continues. First, a check of Monday weather. Here's AccuWeather.com meteorologist La Troy Thornton.
As a cold front tries to push eastward but struggles to make inroads against strong high pressure centered over the Appalachian Mountains, thunderstorms from northern lower Michigan and east-central parts of the Upper Peninsula, south and west to far northeastern New Mexico may be able to turn severe this afternoon. These storms may bring strong wind gusts, hail, and tornadoes, with flooding also a concern that will continue to develop through this week in some of these areas as well, especially from eastern Nebraska into northern Michigan, as storm after storm is forced to take a similar track around that potent zone of high pressure. This is expected to lead to a zone of at least 4 to 8 inches of rain from the west side of Omaha to the I-94 corridor of west central Wisconsin through Thursday, with at least an inch or 2 of rain expected from western Kansas to southeastern South Dakota and points north and east through much of Michigan. Another major story for today will be the progression of hot conditions across more of the east in general, but the northeast in particular, as the aforementioned zone of high pressure continues to strengthen and expand. This will mean the start of what promises to be an intense heat wave for cities such as New York, where high temperatures in the mid-90s today and Tuesday will threaten records that have stood since 1888. Widespread highs in at least the 90s can be expected today and tomorrow from southern Maine through much of the Great Lakes and into the south central plains as well as most of the mid-Atlantic. For the rest of the nation, it's a generally dry start to the new week, outside of pockets of mainly afternoon thunderstorms over much of the south and around the northern Rockies. In the nation's capital, expect a very humid but sunny day to bring the hottest day so far this year, the high reaching 100. For Missoula, Montana, it's looking warmer with some sunshine, perhaps an afternoon thundershower, high 69. That's the nation's weather. I'm AccuWeather.com meteorologist La Troy Thornton.
Remember, you can follow us wherever you get your podcasts. Simply search America in the Morning in your favorite listening app. Shaheen Gabani is a U.S.-educated nuclear engineer and a member of the National Council of Resistance of Iran, Iran's government in exile, ready to step in at any moment. Shaheen, how close to collapse is the current Iranian regime?
Well, I think the regime has never been any weaker. One has to remember that it has faced 5 uprisings in the last 7 years, in which the network of the resistance units affiliated to the People's Mujahideen Organization of Iran, the main Iranian resistance movement, has played a key role. And all indications point out that another uprising looms on the horizon, and that's what makes the regime, and particularly its supreme leader, Ali Khamenei, very, very worried.
Obviously, you'd like to see regime change. Why isn't the U.S. or the UN or the world demanding one?
This is the task of the Iranian people and the organized resistance.
All right, yes, but what percentage of Iranians want to see the Ayatollah ousted and the government you propose installed?
96% of the people are against this regime. Mm-hmm. They call themselves the government of 4%. So that means that 96% of the people really, really want to change in Iran. And as Iranians, people have been chanting in their protests a rejection of both monarchy, which is the previous dictatorship, and the current theocracy.
And your group isn't seeking the help of the U.S. to install the new leader. Yours is one of a transitional government.
You're not seeking any funds or any weapons from the U.S. or any other government to that effect, or any boots on the ground. The National Council of Resistance of Iran has elected Madam Maryam Rajavi to be the president-elect for a transitional period. So when the mullahs are ousted, we will have a true democracy. She has introduced a 10-point plan which calls for separation of government and religion, for a non-nuclear Iran, an Iran which will be friendly with the rest of the world, and an Iran that abides with the freedoms. That plan has been supported by thousands of parliamentarians, including the majority members of the U.S. House of Representatives, in a bipartisan way.
The Ayatollah has said, death to Israel, death to America, and there doesn't appear to be a diplomatic solution in sight. Does the Ayatollah just want the whole country decimated and would never surrender?
One has to remember that there has been a war going on between this regime and the Iranian people in the past 4 decades. And I think that is the most underlying factor that will determine the future of Iran. And Iranian people, led by the resistance, are determined to put an end to this chapter and bring back Iran to the modern times. And I think that is the element that the people of America should come to and realize, that there is a very strong resistance movement inside Iran that is striving to bring about a change by itself, with blood and toil all these years.
The NCRI, National Council of Resistance of Iran, hopes to be seated soon. Our guest, Shaheen Gabani. America in the Morning. U.S. strikes Iran. Special report continues. The Business Report is brought to you by Fisher Investments. Fisher Investments has a team of specialists in investing, financial planning, estate planning, and more. Learn more at FisherInvestments.com. Well, how will action in the Middle East rattle markets today? Here's CNBC's Jessica Ettinger.
Wall Street opens this morning after a losing week for stocks last week and low volume with people off for Juneteenth. Of course, the markets were closed last Thursday, and then a lot of people took Friday off as well. Today, the market's expected to react to the U.S. entering the Israel-Iran conflict after bombing Iranian nuclear targets over the weekend. Last night, futures opened lower, pointing to a lower morning this morning for the major stock averages. And as of last night, oil and natural gas prices were higher.
Oil is another major focus. The WTI crude, U.S. oil up 2%. Brent, of course, the global benchmark up 2%. And nat gas popping about 1.3%.
That's CNBC's Morgan Brennan. Here's RBC's head of commodity trading, Halima Croft, who says Iran's retaliation, it's probably coming.
What is the Iranian response? And I think a lot of people are saying, okay, the worst is over. The United States hit these facilities. What can Iran do? It has no interest in stopping ships from going through the Straits of Hormuz. That would hurt themselves economically. But if you're Iran and you believe that this is potentially a regime change exercise, and the statements from President Trump seemingly signal that he is thinking about regime change, what cards do Iran have left to play? You target U.S. troops in the region. You go for energy supplies. You potentially drive up the price of oil and make people in the West rethink this action.
And look at prices at the pump this morning already. This is how it affects average Americans. AAA says the national average for a gallon of regular gas hit $3.22 yesterday. Gas prices are already up about 10 cents a gallon in less than a week. Here's CNBC's Brian Sullivan on what higher oil prices and higher gas prices mean for you, the consumer.
Higher oil prices and any further retaliation could have an impact on prices, things that you pay. Oil and gas, not just in your tank, they go into almost everything that you buy. So if we see that cost go up, it's possible inflation goes up, which might ultimately put a wrench in the Fed's plans to maybe cut rates later on this year.
And interest rates impact you through the mortgage rate you get when you buy a home, the interest you pay on your credit cards and car loans, and more. Aside from Middle East tension, executives at Disney this morning are heading for a rough morning after Elio disappointed at the box office over the weekend. Its Pixar animated adventure earning just $21 million, ranking it as the worst start in modern history for the studio, Pixar. Universal's How to Train Your Dragon remained at number one. Universal's a sister company to CNBC. On today's watch list, everything we just mentioned. Plus, it is the first trading day of summer. We also get existing home sales numbers for May.
Thank you, CNBC's Jessica Ettinger. Welcome back. Here with America in the Morning. Special report, U.S. strikes Iran. There is a push in the Iranian parliament to close the Strait of Hormuz. 20% of global oil flows through that passageway. Vice President J.D. Vance says such action would be suicidal for Iran as their entire economy runs through that waterway. America in the Morning's Jeff McKay has a look at other stories making headlines.
A Tennessee judge on Sunday ordered the release of Kilmar Abrego Garcia, whose deportation to El Salvador became a flashpoint in the Trump administration's immigration crackdown. Abrego Garcia is not expected to go free as he is awaiting trial and faces charges of human smuggling. ICE could likely detain him. 6 people dead, 2 others injured when a boat capsized in Lake Tahoe over the weekend. The Coast Guard believes winds on Lake Tahoe may have played a factor with 6 to 8 feet swells reported. In Wayne, Michigan, tragedy averted when a man in tactical gear opened fire inside a church. Wayne County Police Chief Ryan Strong says he was stopped by members of the church.
A parishioner struck the gunman with his vehicle as the gunman shot the vehicle repeatedly. At least 2 staff members shot the gunman, causing fatal wounds.
Mahmoud Khalil, the Columbia University protester who was once held by ICE at a detention center awaiting deportation and was freed by a judge, spoke to reporters for the first time at Newark Airport, saying his fight to protest Israel's actions in Gaza will continue.
The U.S. government is funding this genocide, and Columbia University is investing in this genocide.
A relentless heat wave overspreading an area from the Midwest into the East Coast with tens of millions of people facing triple-digit temperatures. By midweek, heat indexes of 110 degrees or more will cover an area that includes New York City, Philadelphia, and Washington, D.C. I'm Jeff McKay.
Overnight, Israel says 21 people have been wounded as Iranian missiles continue to rain down. Searches are underway for people believed to be trapped in the rubble of a building in Tel Aviv. Stay tuned to this station for the latest developments from Washington and in the Middle East. For Monday, June 23rd, 2025, America in the Morning Special Report, U.S. Strikes Iran, is produced by Alexander Hinton. I'm John Trout. This is Westwood One. This is America in the Morning from Westwood One. Special report, U.S. strikes Iran. I'm John Trout. Coming up this half hour.
President Trump calling Operation Midnight Hammer a success. I'm Julie Walker.
International calls for Iran and the U.S. to resume talking.
Resist the temptation to fan the flames of conflict.
I'm Richard Johnson.
Precision-guided high-tech ordnance deployed on targets for the first time. I'm Chuck Palm.
The impacts of U.S. strikes on Iran on oil. I'm Clayton Neville.
Our program continues after these messages. Most of the world has seen now reconnaissance photos of the 3 Iranian nuclear sites hit over the weekend. Destroyed, obliterated, seemingly reduced to powder. The U.S. military carrying out the operation with B-2 bombers and a guided missile submarine. Julie Walker brings us up to date.
The U.S. striking 3 Iranian nuclear facilities early Sunday, Fordo, Isfahan, and Natanz. President Trump calling Operation Midnight Hammer a success.
Iran's key nuclear enrichment facilities have been completely and totally obliterated. Iran, the bully of the Middle East, must now make peace. If they do not, future attacks will be far greater.
Joint Chiefs Chairman Dan Kane says B-2 bombers from Missouri carrying 14 bunker busters weighing 30,000 pounds each hit their targets along with other U.S. firepower.
Final battle damage will take some time, but initial battle damage assessments indicate that all 3 sites sustained extremely severe damage and destruction.
Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth says despite the surprise attack, the U.S. does not seek regime change or war.
Any retaliation by Iran against the United States of America will be met with force far greater than what was witnessed.
Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi says his country reserves the right to retaliate.
The U.S. administration holds sole and full responsibility for the consequences of its actions. Iran reserves all options to defend its security.
After the U.S. attack, Iran striking Israel, launching more than 40 missiles, wounding at least 23 people, destroying apartment buildings and homes in 3 cities. Still, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu thanking Trump for bringing the U.S. into the conflict.
America has been truly unsurpassed. It has done what no other country on earth could do.
Trump's decision to directly involve America, drawing both praise and criticism from U.S. lawmakers and the world. I'm Julie Walker.
The Trump administration and officials at the Pentagon were quick to inform the American people. Our John Stolnis has more on reaction from the administration and lawmakers in Washington.
Tonight I can report to the world that the strikes were a spectacular military success.
In a speech to the nation late Saturday night, President Trump announcing the U.S. carried out attacks on underground sites in 3 locations aimed at further crippling Iran's nuclear program. Trump expressed hope Iran would now come to the table and restart peace negotiations they had pulled out of more than a week ago.
Iran, the bully of the Middle East, must now make peace.
At a Pentagon briefing yesterday morning, Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth praised the work of the military and the courage of Donald Trump.
Many presidents have dreamed of delivering the final blow to Iran's nuclear program, and none could until President Trump.
Speaking on NBC's Meet the Press, Vice President J.D. Vance said the bombings set the Iranian nuclear program back years and tried to ease fears of a broader conflict.
We have no interest in boots on the ground. The president has actually been one of the fiercest critics of 25 years of failed foreign policy in the Middle East, which is why he did what he did. A very precise, a very surgical strike.
Most congressional Democrats, like Senator Tim Kaine speaking on Fox News Sunday, argue U.S. intelligence didn't believe Iran was close to getting a nuclear weapon.
There was no imminent threat to the United States from this nuclear program. It was an offensive war of choice by a president without consultation with Congress.
Kaine and other Democrats will be putting forth resolutions demanding Congress grant war powers to the president before any further military action is taken. John Stolnis, Washington.
From the literal war to the war of words, the U.S. attack on Iran's nuclear sites drew praise and condemnation, and many calls to return to diplomacy. Correspondent Rich Johnson has more on Sunday's emergency meeting of the United Nations Security Council.
The U.S. ambassador to the UN, Dorothy Camille Shea, said that after more than 40 years of Iran shouting death to America,
the time finally came for the United States, in the defense of its ally and in the defense of our own citizens and interest, to act decisively.
A move that won praise from Israel's UN ambassador, Danny Danon.
This action was a necessity. It was a righteous act for the United States, for Israel, for the Middle East, and for the world.
Danon accused Iran of using diplomacy as a delay tactic in order to enrich uranium and build missiles. Iran's ambassador was not moved.
Madam President, history will not forget these tragic days.
Ambassador Amir Saeed Iravani laid the ultimate blame on Israel and its leader and his influence over President Trump.
Once again, the internationally wanted war criminal Netanyahu succeeded in hijacking U.S. foreign policy, dragging the United States into yet another costly, baseless war.
Iravani gave no hint about what Iran might do next, saying that's up to its military. And Iran found a few allies in the room, including the diplomat from Moscow, speaking through an interpreter.
Russia condemns in the most decisive terms the irresponsible, dangerous, and provocative actions committed by the USA against the Islamic Republic of Iran.
But most other diplomats seated around the huge round Security Council table backed not the U.S. or Iran, but their reason for being: diplomacy.
It is imperative to avoid any further military escalation.
Now is the time to return to negotiations in order to reach a diplomatic solution.
The Middle East cannot afford yet another violent conflict where civilians pay the price of military confrontations.
We urge Iran now to show restraint.
Resist the temptation to fan the flames of conflict.
I'm Rich Johnson.
Correspondent Chuck Palm has a closer look at the high-tech ordnance and guidance of the bunker buster bombs used in Operation Midnight Hammer.
In light of the U.S. military strikes in Iran this past weekend, today's tech report will be on the massive ordnance penetrator, or MOP bomb GBU-57, that was used in Operation Midnight Hammer. The 30,000-pound precision-guided bomb deployed by the B-2 Spirit stealth bomber is designed to penetrate and obliterate deeply buried targets like those fortified facilities in Iran. This ordnance has 5,000 pounds of explosives and is GPS guided with a hardened steel case and the ability to burrow through 200 feet of soil or concrete before detonating. Makes it the perfect choice for hitting those targets that are buried underground without much collateral damage. Given the depths of the target at the facilities, multiple MOP bombs were dropped by the B-2 stealth bombers. Reports have shown that the Fordo facilities were buried up to 100 meters, or about 330 feet, requiring multiple missile drops to achieve that depth and take out the target. The MOP's precision comes from its dual guidance system with not only GPS, but an inertial navigational system that ensures pinpoint strikes, a specialized fuse with programmable detonation at a specific depth called the layer penetration sensing fuse, and counts voids or layers, ensuring explosion at the target core. At 20 feet long, this is the largest non-nuclear bomb in the U.S. arsenal and marks its debut for wartime deployment. For America in the Morning, I'm Chuck Palm.
Gasoline prices in the U.S. have been steadily increasing over the past several days, and now oil prices have shot higher. Correspondent Clayton Neville explains.
Reports indicate that Iran's parliament is backing the idea of closing the Strait of Hormuz following strikes by the United States on Iranian nuclear sites. That would greatly impact access to oil, bringing the potential of skyrocketing prices. The strait's a vital transit channel for about a fifth of the world's oil supply. But many lawmakers in D.C. say that it was a necessary move regardless of Iran's potential response. Senator Tom Cotton spoke with ABC's This Week.
There's no doubt that because of the president's decisive action, we have severely damaged Iran's critical nuclear infrastructure.
U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio said in a statement that closing the Hormuz Strait would be economic suicide for Iran and called on China to discourage Iran from making that move. Implications already evident. Prices opened up 4% on Sunday. They gained about 3% last week in the wake of Israel's initial strikes on Iran and the retaliation that followed. I'm Clayton Neville.
America in the Morning continues. Shaheen Gobadi is a U.S.-educated nuclear engineer and member of the National Council of Resistance, the NCRI, Iran's parliament in exile. Shaheen, is the current regime in Iran on the brink of collapse?
Well, I think the regime has never been any weaker. One has to remember that it has faced 5 uprisings in the last 7 years, in which the network of the resistance units affiliated to the People's Mujahideen Organization of Iran, the main Iranian resistance movement, has played a key role. And all indications point out that another uprising looms on the horizon, and that's what makes the regime, and particularly its Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei, very, very worried.
Obviously, you'd like to see regime change. Why isn't the U.S. or the UN or the world demanding one?
This is the task of the Iranian people and the organized resistance.
All right, yes, but what percentage of Iranians want to see the Ayatollah ousted and the government you propose installed?
96% of the people are against this regime. Mm-hmm. They call themselves the government of 4%. So that means that 96% of the people really, really want to change in Iran. And as Iranians, people have been chanting in their protests a rejection of both monarchy, which is the previous dictatorship, and the current theocracy.
And your group isn't seeking the help of the U.S. to install the new leader. Yours is one of a transitional government.
You're not seeking any funds or any weapons from the U.S. or any other government to that effect, or any boots on the ground. The National Council of Resistance of Iran has elected Madam Maryam Rajavi to be the president-elect for a transitional period. So when the mullahs are ousted, we will have a true democracy. She has introduced a 10-point plan which calls for separation of government and religion, for a non-nuclear Iran, in Iran which will be friendly with the rest of the world, and an Iran that abides with the freedoms. That plan has been supported by thousands of parliamentarians, including the majority members of the U.S. House of Representatives, in a bipartisan way.
The Ayatollah has said, death to Israel, death to America, and there doesn't appear to be a diplomatic solution in sight. Does the Ayatollah just want the whole country decimated and would never surrender?
One has to remember that there has been a war going on between this regime and the Iranian people in the past 4 decades. And I think that is the most underlying factor that will determine the future of Iran. And Iranian people, led by the resistance, are determined to put an end to this chapter and bring back Iran to the modern times. And I think that is the element that the people of America should come to realize, that there is a very strong resistance movement inside Iran that is striving to bring about a change by itself, with blood and toil, all these years.
The NCRI, National Council of Resistance of Iran, hopes to be seated soon. Our guest, Shaheen Gobadi. America in the Morning special report, U.S. strikes Iran, continues. I'm John Trout. Following the successful U.S. military airstrikes on 3 Iranian nuclear sites, Iran's Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei vows revenge. Donna Warder reports.
Hours after the U.S. attacked 3 Iranian nuclear sites, Iran launched more than 40 missiles toward Israel, wounding dozens and destroying structures. But how could Iran retaliate against the U.S.? There could be a wave of attacks on U.S. forces in the Middle East, or an attempt to disrupt the movement of oil through the Strait of Hormuz, sending oil prices soaring worldwide. Ambassador Barbara Leaf, the Assistant Secretary of State for Near Eastern Affairs in the Biden administration, says Iran's main priority is preservation of the Islamic Republic.
If the regime feels that its existence is at stake, it will use any weapons that come to hand, whether the arsenal of ballistic missiles, depleted conventional forces, terrorism, asymmetrical attacks.
But Leaf says so far Iran has signaled that it's trying to avoid a front with the U.S. Donna Warder, Washington.
In other stories making news this morning, Game 7 of the NBA Finals is in the books. Here's America in the Morning's Robert Workman.
The Oklahoma City Thunder are the new NBA champions. They beat the Indiana Pacers 102-87 to win Game 7 of the Finals at home Sunday night. The Pacers lost their star Tyrese Halliburton to an Achilles injury just 7 minutes into the game, but still managed to hold the lead at halftime before OKC blew things wide open. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander had 29 points and added the Finals Most Valuable Player award to his regular season league MVP. He's the first player to win both awards and the scoring title since Shaquille O'Neal 25 years ago. That's Monday Sports.
The UN's atomic watchdog and other experts say radiological contamination in Iran is likely inside a key uranium enrichment site at Natanz. Just one of many reports coming out of the region following U.S. airstrikes over the weekend. Stay tuned to this station for the latest developments. That's our show for today, Monday, June 23rd, 2025. America in the Morning Special Report, U.S. Strikes Iran, is produced by Alexander Hinton. I'm John Trout. This is Westwood One.